I was 5 minutes away from finally exposing everything I had built in silence. Everything my family thought I didn't have, everything they underestimated me for. The envelope was already in my hand, heavy with proof that would change the way they looked at me forever. But then I heard his voice through the half-open door. My son-in-law. He wasn't supposed to be in that room. And he definitely wasn't supposed to sound that calm while saying my name like I was already out of the picture. Once he signs it over, we're done playing nice. I stopped walking. My fingers tightened around the edge of the envelope. Then he laughed softly, like he already knew the ending of a story I hadn't even finished telling yet. That was the moment I realized I wasn't the one about to reveal the truth. I was the one being prepared to lose control of it. The opening moment works because it immediately creates emotional tension and unanswered questions without giving away the full situation. Instead of explaining everything up front, it places me in a very specific, high-stakes moment, holding an envelope that clearly matters, while hinting that something important is about to happen. That physical detail, the envelope, acts like a symbol. It tells the audience there is a secret, something valuable or life-changing, but they don't yet know what it contains. That gap between what is shown and what is hidden is what pulls people in. At the same time, the interruption, hearing my son-in-law on the phone, shifts the direction of the scene instantly. Just as the audience expects a reveal, something blocks it. This creates a strong curiosity loop. Viewers start asking questions. What is in the envelope? Why was I about to reveal it? What did he say on the phone? Why does it matter? Instead of answering, the story adds another layer of tension by introducing betrayal through overheard dialogue. The line about, "once he signs it over," implies manipulation and hidden intentions, but it doesn't fully explain the plan. That partial information is critical because it forces the audience to stay engaged to understand the full truth. Emotionally, the hook also establishes a quiet shift in power. At first, I seem like someone about to share something vulnerable. But the moment I hear that conversation, the tone changes. I don't react loudly or confront him immediately. Instead, I become still, observant, and controlled. That restraint signals to the audience that I am not as simple as I appear. It introduces the idea of silent power, where the real strength comes from knowing more than others realize and choosing the right moment to act. The pacing is also important. Short sentences and pauses slow the moment down, making it feel more intense and real. It allows the audience to sit in that tension rather than rushing past it. Each line adds a small piece of information while holding back the bigger picture. This creates a layered effect where curiosity, suspicion, and emotional stakes build at the same time. This section works by deliberately lowering the perceived status of the narrator, while quietly establishing control and depth underneath. The goal is to make the character appear ordinary on the surface so that later revelations feel earned and impactful. Every detail is chosen to reinforce that impression: an older vehicle, simple clothing, a modest house, and a routine that seems uneventful. These are signals that most viewers subconsciously associate with limited success or a small life. That assumption is intentional because it shapes how other characters treat the narrator and how the audience initially perceives him. At the same time, the routine is not framed as emptiness, but as discipline and stability. Waking up early, sitting in the same place, drinking coffee, and observing the same quiet street suggests consistency and control rather than stagnation. This distinction matters because it subtly hints that the narrator is not lost or struggling, just private. The calm environment contrasts with the tension that will come later, making the shift more noticeable and effective. Another important element is how information is withheld. The narrator describes his work vaguely as consulting, which is believable but non-specific. This prevents both the characters and the audience from fully understanding his financial or professional situation. That ambiguity is a key tool because it creates a hidden layer beneath the visible one. People around him fill in the gaps with their own assumptions, usually underestimating him. That misjudgment becomes the foundation for future conflict and eventual reversal. The section also introduces a psychological advantage. Being underestimated allows the narrator to observe without interference. When people think someone has little influence or knowledge, they lower their guard. They speak more freely, act more honestly, and reveal their intentions without realizing it. The narrator recognizes this and uses it strategically, even if it's not openly stated. His quiet nature becomes a form of protection and intelligence rather than weakness. There is also a subtle emotional layer. The simplicity of his life creates relatability. Many viewers see parts of themselves in routine, modest living, or being overlooked. This connection builds trust with the audience, making them more invested in his perspective. It ensures that when tension and betrayal begin to unfold, the audience is already aligned with him and feels the injustice more strongly. This part of the story establishes the emotional core by introducing the key relationships and layering them with subtle tension rather than obvious conflict. The focus is on creating depth between the narrator, his daughter, and the son-in-law, while slowly revealing imbalance in respect and influence. The relationship with the daughter is built on history, sacrifice, and quiet care. By mentioning raising her alone and consistently showing up for her, the narrator earns emotional credibility. This makes the audience trust his perspective and feel protective of that bond. It also raises the stakes because any disruption to that relationship carries real emotional weight. At the same time, the daughter is not portrayed as weak or careless. She is independent and kind, which makes her decisions feel realistic rather than forced. Her quick marriage introduces tension without directly labeling it as a mistake. Instead of open conflict, there is restraint. The narrator doesn't object strongly, which reflects a common real-life dynamic. People often hold back to avoid pushing loved ones away. This restraint adds authenticity and creates space for the audience to sense that something is off before it is confirmed. The son-in-law is introduced through behavior, not direct accusation. His character is built using small, controlled moments, tone shifts, subtle remarks, and conversational dominance. These micro-interactions are important because they mirror how disrespect often appears in real life. It's rarely loud or obvious at first. Instead, it hides behind politeness, sarcasm, or intellectual superiority. His comments about simplicity and future planning are technically harmless on the surface, but the underlying tone suggests judgment. This creates emotional friction without breaking realism. Another key element is conversational control. The son-in-law leads discussions, especially around money and status, positioning himself as knowledgeable and authoritative. Meanwhile, the narrator stays quiet, which reinforces the perception of imbalance. However, this silence is not submission, it is observation. That distinction is crucial because it maintains the silent power dynamic. The audience begins to sense that the narrator understands more than he shows, even if others don't. The daughter's role in smoothing over tension adds another layer. She acts as a bridge, trying to maintain harmony, which is realistic in family dynamics. However, this also highlights how influence is shifting toward the son-in-law. This gradual shift creates unease without requiring a major event, allowing tension to build naturally and setting up the emotional impact of later betrayal. This section functions as the transition from subtle tension into clear suspicion, where the narrator begins to sense that something is wrong but does not yet have full proof. The effectiveness comes from escalation through small, believable changes rather than dramatic events. Instead of introducing a sudden conflict, the story shows gradual shifts in behavior, visits becoming less personal, the daughter no longer acting independently, and decisions increasingly influenced by the son-in-law. These patterns signal a loss of balance in the relationship, which creates emotional discomfort without needing explicit confrontation. The key technique here is pattern recognition. One isolated moment would not be enough to raise concern, but repeated changes start forming a noticeable trend. The narrator observes these patterns quietly, which aligns with his established personality. This keeps the tone consistent while allowing tension to grow organically. The audience experiences the same slow realization, which strengthens engagement because they are piecing together the situation alongside the narrator. The introduction of the paperwork is the first concrete trigger. It shifts the situation from emotional unease to something more tangible and potentially dangerous. Documents represent authority, legality, and long-term consequences, so their presence immediately raises the stakes. The son-in-law presenting them as simple contrasts with their actual complexity, creating a clear mismatch between intention and reality. That contrast is important because it suggests manipulation without stating it directly. Another critical element is the narrator's reaction. Instead of refusing outright or reacting emotionally, he chooses to review the documents carefully. This reinforces his calm and analytical nature while also delaying the conflict. The delay is strategic because it keeps the audience in suspense. They know something is wrong, but they don't yet know how serious it is or what the narrator will do about it. When the narrator reads the documents alone, the tension deepens. This private moment allows the audience to focus on the implications without interruption. The realization that control is being shifted gradually, rather than taken outright, adds realism. It reflects how manipulation often works, through complexity and small steps that seem harmless individually but become significant over time. The emotional impact comes from the combination of betrayal and restraint. The narrator is not yet confronting anyone, but internally, the shift has already happened. He is no longer passive, he is alert. That quiet awareness marks the turning point where observation becomes preparation. This section is where the narrative begins to reframe everything the audience thought they understood about the narrator, but it does so without fully revealing the truth. The purpose is to introduce the idea that there is hidden depth and capability beneath the simple exterior, while still holding back enough information to maintain suspense. Instead of a sudden, complete disclosure, the story provides controlled hints that suggest scale and significance without defining them entirely. This keeps the audience curious while gradually shifting their perception. The key mechanism here is contrast. Up to this point, the narrator has been presented as modest, routine-driven, and somewhat overlooked. By quietly introducing past investments, long-term planning, and disciplined decision-making, the story begins to contradict that surface image. However, it does not abandon the established personality. The narrator is still calm, still understated, which makes the new information feel believable rather than exaggerated. The power lies in consistency. He didn't suddenly become capable, he always was. Another important element is the emphasis on patience. The narrator's success is framed as the result of time, strategy, and restraint rather than luck or dramatic breakthroughs. This aligns with the silent power theme, where strength is built quietly and revealed only when necessary. It also adds realism, because gradual growth through investments and careful choices is something the audience can understand and accept. By avoiding flashy details, the story maintains credibility while still increasing the perceived scale of what has been built. The envelope becomes a central symbol in this section. It represents both the hidden truth and the narrator's control over when that truth is revealed. By stating that it contains significant assets but not detailing every aspect, the story creates a partial reveal. The audience now knows enough to understand the stakes, but not enough to predict exactly how things will unfold. This balance is critical for maintaining engagement. The emotional shift is subtle but important. The narrator moves from being reactive to strategic. After hearing the phone call, the decision to delay the reveal shows control and awareness. It signals that the situation is no longer just about being betrayed, but about choosing the right moment to respond. This shift builds anticipation for the confrontation while reinforcing that the narrator is operating from a position of strength. Even if others have not realized it yet, this section is the structural peak of tension where all previously planted elements, suspicion, emotional imbalance, are brought into a single, controlled confrontation. The setting plays a critical role. A normal family dinner creates contrast, because the environment is calm and familiar, yet the underlying tension is high. This contrast makes every line of dialogue feel heavier. Nothing appears explosive on the surface, but the stakes are already established, so even small exchanges carry meaning. The pacing is deliberate. The conversation starts casually, with the son-in-law bringing up the documents in a relaxed tone. This reflects confidence and an assumption of control. He expects compliance, not resistance. The narrator's response, however, disrupts that expectation. Instead of reacting emotionally, he stays measured and precise. This shift is subtle but powerful, because it signals that the balance of control is changing without needing a dramatic outburst. Dialogue becomes the main tool for tension. Each line serves a purpose, either revealing intention, testing boundaries, or exposing underlying conflict. The narrator's choice of words is especially important. He doesn't accuse directly at first. He points out details, such as the complexity of the documents and who they actually benefit. This forces the son-in-law into a defensive position without the narrator appearing aggressive. It's a controlled escalation rather than a confrontation driven by anger. The turning point occurs when the narrator introduces the overheard phone call. This moment collapses any remaining ambiguity. Up until then, the son-in-law could hide behind plausible explanations. Once the exact words are repeated, that protection disappears. The tension shifts from suspicion to confirmation. The silence that follows is as important as the dialogue because it reflects the emotional impact on both the daughter and the son-in-law. Another key aspect is emotional restraint. The narrator does not raise his voice or attempt to dominate the scene physically. This restraint reinforces the quiet power dynamic. It shows that control comes from clarity and timing rather than force. In contrast, the son-in-law's composure begins to weaken, revealing the gap between perceived authority and actual control. The daughter's presence adds complexity. She is not just an observer, she is emotionally affected, caught between trust and realization. Her reactions amplify the stakes without requiring additional conflict, allowing the scene to remain grounded, while still delivering a strong turning point. This section delivers the payoff that the entire narrative has been building toward, but it does so through controlled revelation rather than dramatic explosion. The effectiveness comes from timing and contrast. Up to this point, the narrator has been perceived as modest, possibly even vulnerable. By calmly introducing the contents of the envelope, that perception is overturned in a single, grounded moment. The reveal is not just about money or assets, it is about redefining identity. The audience realizes that everything they assumed, along with the son-in-law's assumptions, was incomplete. The delivery is critical. Instead of using emotional or confrontational language, the narrator remains composed. This calmness amplifies the impact because it signals confidence and certainty. There is no need to argue or defend. The truth speaks for itself. This approach aligns with the established personality, maintaining consistency while elevating the stakes. If the reveal were loud or aggressive, it would feel out of character and reduce credibility. The physical action of placing the envelope on the table serves as a visual anchor. It makes the moment tangible and grounded. Rather than abstract explanation, the reveal is tied to something concrete that both characters and the audience can focus on. As the documents are reviewed, the reaction becomes part of the storytelling. The daughter's confusion and the son-in-law's hesitation replace the need for excessive explanation. Their responses validate the significance of the reveal without the narrator needing to overstate it. Another important aspect is the shift in power dynamics. Before this moment, the son-in-law operates from a position of assumed authority, using knowledge and confidence to control the situation. Once the assets are revealed, that authority collapses. The narrator, who appeared passive, is now clearly in control. This reversal is satisfying because it feels earned. The story has carefully built toward it through earlier hints and restraint. The reveal also connects directly to the earlier conflict with the documents. By showing the scale of what the narrator actually owns, it becomes clear how serious the attempted manipulation was. This reinforces the sense of betrayal while simultaneously resolving the tension. The audience now understands both the risk and the outcome, making the moment feel complete and impactful. This section focuses on the consequences of the reveal and how the emotional and power dynamics settle after the peak confrontation. Instead of extending the conflict, the narrative intentionally slows down and allows reactions to carry the weight. The intensity from the previous moment doesn't disappear, but it transforms into silence, hesitation, and subtle behavioral changes. This shift in pacing is important because it gives the audience time to process what just happened while observing how each character responds under pressure. The daughter's reaction is central here. She is not written as defensive or confrontational, which keeps the situation realistic. Her quiet response shows internal conflict. She is processing both the betrayal and the new understanding of her father. This layered reaction avoids oversimplification and makes the emotional impact feel genuine. It also reinforces the idea that trust has been shaken, not just between her and her husband, but in her overall perception of the situation. The son-in-law's behavior reflects a loss of control. Earlier, he guided conversations and projected confidence. Now, his actions are minimal and cautious. Standing up, suggesting they leave, and avoiding eye contact are all signals of retreat. There is no argument or attempt to regain dominance, which highlights how complete the shift in power has been. His silence becomes more telling than any dialogue, emphasizing that he recognizes the situation has moved beyond his influence. Another important element is the narrator's continued restraint. Even after the reveal, he does not pursue further confrontation or attempt to humiliate anyone. This consistency strengthens the quiet power theme. His control is not temporary or situational, it defines how he handles both conflict and resolution. By not escalating the moment, he maintains dignity and keeps the focus on truth rather than emotion. The brief exchange at the door adds closure without resolving everything. The daughter's apology is tentative, showing awareness but not final judgment. The narrator's response is calm and open-ended, suggesting that time is needed for clarity. This approach avoids forcing a resolution and instead reflects how real situations unfold. Gradually, with space for reflection and change, the ending section is designed to provide emotional closure while reinforcing the central theme of quiet strength rather than loud victory. Instead of extending conflict or introducing new twists, the narrative returns to simplicity, mirroring the opening tone but with a fundamentally changed internal meaning. The environment remains the same house, same routine, same silence, but the narrator's perception of it has shifted. This contrast between external stability and internal transformation is what gives the ending its emotional weight. The narrator's morning routine is intentionally repeated to show continuity. He sits in the same chair, drinks the same coffee, and observes the same street. However, these actions now carry a different emotional tone. Earlier in the story, the routine represented concealment and patience. In the ending, it represents clarity and self-assurance. This subtle shift allows the audience to feel resolution without needing explicit statements about victory or revenge. A key psychological element here is restraint. The narrator does not seek validation from others or attempt to explain what happened. There is no desire to prove superiority. This reinforces the idea that true control does not require recognition. The absence of confrontation in the ending is just as important as the confrontation itself, because it shows that the outcome has already been internalized. The reflection focuses on observation rather than emotion. The narrator recognizes how perception shaped the entire conflict, how being underestimated allowed others to reveal their intentions, and how silence created space for understanding. This perspective reframes the earlier betrayal not as chaos, but as information that was revealed over time. It transforms the experience into something analytical rather than purely emotional. The final emotional tone is calm acceptance. There is no bitterness or regret shown, only awareness of how the situation unfolded and why patience mattered. The quiet victory comes from the realization that control was never about force or argument, but about timing, awareness, and restraint. By choosing not to react impulsively, the narrator maintained advantage throughout the entire sequence. The ending avoids traditional resolution markers like confrontation aftermath or reconciliation scenes. Instead, it leaves the audience with a sense of internal completion. The world remains unchanged on the surface, but the meaning of that world has shifted entirely for the narrator, who now understands that the most effective power is the one that does not announce itself,